A plane crash caused by manual error, an entire soccer stadium catching on fire, and the reason you don't piss off Genghis Khan. I'm your host Jay Durana, and we have all of this on today's top 10 list. Coming in number 10, we have plane crash. Back in 2015, there was a horrifying plane crash that happened in Taiwan that could have been prevented. The crash happened when a plane spun out of control taking off from the Taiwanese International Airport. This plane lost control and crashed into the Keelong River. 43 people were killed when the plane came tumbling towards the earth, and after an investigation it was determined that a piloting error caused the crash. The pilot had a flame out on one of the engines and went to turn off the engine so he could get it working again. Did you know that plane engines work like that? I didn't know that plane engines work like that, but it makes sense. It seems like every tech problem can be solved by turning the system on and off again. Well, he turned off the wrong engine, and this caused the plane to fall towards the earth in a free fall. The pilot tried to gain control of the plane, but it was too close to the earth and too late. If this simple mistake didn't happen, then this plane might have never gone down. Luckily, 13 people did survive the crash, but are probably too afraid to ever fly again. Coming in number 9, we have the BP oil spill. If you don't remember this was when a massive oil company known as BP Oil dug a well too deep in the ocean, and they had no way to deal with it if anything went wrong, and something went wrong. The company claimed that they were prepared for any sort of spill, but in reality they only knew how to deal with shallow water spills, and this one was over 35,000 feet underwater. It was the deepest oil well in existence. During the spill, 130 million tons of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico and killed somewhere around 100 million birds, fish, and other wildlife. It was a devastating disaster that tainted the company and ruined a massive ecosystem, and could be the proponent to the future of the end of the world, as this whole climate change disaster keeps getting worse and worse. And when the investigation happened, it was revealed that all of this could have been prevented. There were several regulations that weren't followed, a company culture that worked off of a laid-back attitude, and thousands of workers who didn't really care about following procedures. All of this stacked on top of reckless drilling led to a horrible disaster that the area will feel for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Next on the list, we have the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Back in the 1940s, there was a bridge that was built that connected Tacoma, Washington to the Kitsap Peninsula. It was a wonderful sight, a suspension bridge that could make the city even more whole than it was before. But things got hairy quickly with this bridge, because the people who were in charge of building this amazing wonder decided that they would cheap out on the building supplies and got girders that couldn't handle the force of the winds blowing against them. This caused the bridge to buck and sway in the wind, and I don't know a lot about bridges, but I don't think that's a feature that you want. Eventually the bridge couldn't handle the pressure, and in less than a year it collapsed. When will people learn that cutting corners will eventually catch up with you, and when it does, you're going to be the one holding the bill? Next on the list, we have lighting a signal fire. We all know that California has some problems with wildfires. It's terrifying, and now we know not to light fires anywhere near foliage because it could easily spread to something devastating. Well, it wasn't always known, and back in 2003 there would be a fire in San Diego that would cause billions of dollars in damages. This was known as the California Hunter Fire because there was a hunter who got lost in the forest, and he decided that he would light a signal fire to get help. Now, he didn't clear the area properly, and he ended up causing a massive blaze that was the worst the state has ever seen at that point. When the blaze was at full force, it was expanding at a rate of 15 kilometers an hour. Eventually it was under control, but not until thousands of people lost their homes and millions of wildlife habitats were destroyed. Next on the list, we have thinking the Titanic was unsinkable. I love the arrogance that people from the past will have. They thought that they had everything figured out and that they were the best the world will ever see. To think that you made a boat back in the 1910s and you had the gall to call the thing unsinkable, we all know how the story ends. It sinks, and then Leo drowns and freezes to death, but there was enough room for both of them on the wood. Shut up, no one cares. Let's focus on the boat. Would this accident have happened if the people running the ship all thought that the boat could go down just like any other? Probably not. They would have been much more careful. I mean, nowadays you don't have anything marked as unbreakable or unsinkable because people will sue you when they find out that it's not, because they feel like they've been cheated. In fact, if I saw unbreakable on something, I would think less of the product because I would assume that it's actually cheap. But being extremely bold and outlandish was a selling feature back then. I mean, they used to think that those jiggling machines would make you fit. You know, the ones that you would put around your hips and they would shake you all around? Oh my god, they were so cute. Next on the list, we have the Challenger disaster disaster O-ring. The Challenger disaster was something that marked an entire generation of children. It turned out to be a very unfortunate situation where a school teacher was going to be launched into space with the rest of the astronauts on board. This was to inspire people to get into space travel, mainly children. So when the launch was set to happen, there was a ton of children watching, and then those children saw the ensuing disaster. But having children watch wasn't the mistake. The mistake was the O-ring that most of the engineers knew wouldn't function under cold temperatures. See, the mistake was not pushing back the launch. There was pressure to get the launch done prior to the State of the Union, so they pushed the launch through on that day when the exterior temperature of the ship was somewhere around 32 degrees. When the people running this knew that the O-ring on the ship would start to be faulty around 50 degrees. Because of people ignoring this small issue, it caused one of the O-rings to break and then air to flood into one of the areas on the ship and cause an explosion. If people hadn't made this one small mistake, we would have avoided this disaster altogether. Next on the list we have the Bradford City Fire. Back in 1985, the Bradford Soccer Stadium caught fire and it killed 56 people. The stadium was packed to the rim for a soccer match, and one person smoking a cigarette thought it was okay to just throw it away without properly putting it out. And the cigarette butt landed on some garbage, and before you know it, the entire place was on fire. This spread to the ceiling and most of the stands, and in the chaos 56 people died and 200 more were injured. This could have easily been prevented if that person wasn't so careless with their cigarette. Next on the list we have Rommel's wife's birthday. Now this point is something that cost the Nazis everything, so it was a good mistake, but still very interesting, so I really wanted to talk about it on this list. If it wasn't for this mistake, the Germans might have been able to win the war. We know about D-Day and the attack on Normandy. This was a devastating loss of life, but it was a turning point in the war that allowed the Allied forces to get a foothold in the mouth of the Atlantic. On the day of this attack, there should have been one of the best German officers, Rommel, there to guard and guide them. But June 6th was his wife's birthday, and he had left to go back to Germany. He thought that it would have been impossible for an attack to happen because there was supposed to be a massive storm all week, but it turns out he was wrong. Thankfully he was wrong because it shifted the direction of the war and opened up the Allies to being able to move in through France into Germany. But still interesting how a little mistake changed how the whole war unfolded. Next on the list we have investing in Enron. This was one of the biggest stock market con jobs of all time. We could do a whole list just on this point, but back in the mid-2000s people had billions of dollars invested in the energy company Enron. People had their entire retirements put into this company, and out of nowhere the whole company went under. Stocks dropped from being worth about $95 a share to less than $1. The company was investigated, and it turns out they had been publishing fake profits basically since the company's inception. People sued to get their money back, but after everything was said and done, no money was left. And number one on the list we have pissing off Genghis Khan. Here's a lesson that you will learn from history. Do not piss off Genghis Khan. Even though that won't apply in the future, if you get a time machine and go back in time and meet him, don't piss him off, because it will end poorly for you and everyone around you. In the 13th century there was the Qurthmine Empire. This would be located in what now is Iraq and Iran. This was one of the largest empires in the Middle East, and at the center of it was a citadel that was said to be impenetrable. Well, we all know from the Titanic, everything can be destroyed. Genghis Khan wanted to go to war with China, and to do so, he would need to do some trade with allies. So he sent out some diplomats to the Qurthmine Empire to talk with the Shah, Al-Adin Muhammad, to set up a trade agreement. But the Shah saw the Mongolians as dirty and didn't respect them or fear them. Big mistake. And to show his lack of fright and respect, he decided to kill one of the diplomats and send his head back to Genghis Khan. Haven't you ever heard "don't shoot the messenger"? Well, the Khan saw this as a massive insult because it was, and he put his war on China on hold and moved his attention to the Qurthmine Empire. Genghis Khan showed up there with 200,000 men and siege weapons ready to bring hell. But for as bloodthirsty and ruthless Genghis Khan is, he does have a strange code of ethics. He made an offer to the Shah. He said, "Come out here, I'll kill you, and all your people will live." The Shah thought this was humorous and rejected the Khan's offer, and so Genghis Khan destroyed every last living person and thing in that empire, and then salted the earth and then left. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. Alright guys, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I've been your host, Jay Durena. We'll see you next time. After an investigation, sorry, give me one sec here. And after investigation, it was determined that a piling On the day of this attack, there should have been one of the best German officers, Hommel, on there. On the day of this attack, there should have been one of the best German But June 6th. Let's focus. What's wrong with my mouth today?